He ain't lying. I just wish I could have been out, you know what I'm saying? To prevent a lot of shit, but you know. But nah, Foz, he ain't lying.
Before their sudden disappearance, Munna Duke and Youngin, two of King Von's closest confidants, spoke out with startling honesty about his murder. They didn't just speculate. They pointed fingers, named individuals, and laid bare truths that many were too afraid to voice. Their revelations sent shockwaves through the streets, and soon, murmurs began circulating that they had said too much. Now, some believe they were deliberately silenced. But what exactly did they expose on? Who were they calling out? To understand the weight of their words, we have to go back to that tragic morning on November 6, 2020, a moment that shattered the Chicago drill scene and altered the lives of Von's inner circle. Outside the Monaco Hookah Lounge in Atlanta, a heated argument spiraled into something irreversible, leaving behind questions, pain, and a silence that still echoes. What began as a tense confrontation between King Von's crew and Quando Ron's entourage outside the Monaco Hookah Lounge spiraled into deadly violence within moments. Gunfire erupted, and by the time the chaos settled, Von, just 26 years old, lay fatally wounded. One of drill music's brightest rising stars was gone. His momentum cut short just as he was stepping into global recognition. The shock of his death rippled through the music world. But no place felt the loss more deeply than O'Block, the neighborhood that watched Von rise from its streets to the world stage. For Munna Duke, locked behind bars when tragedy struck, the heartbreaking news filtered in through the prison rumor mill. He never got the chance to say goodbye to the friend he'd known since day one, a loss made heavier by distance, silence, and the finality of fate.
And he gets locked up. I mean, you get locked up. And does he pass away when you're in jail?
Yeah, probably like 4-5 months before I got out. Yeah, that shit happened. Yeah, like 4 or 5 months.
Damn.
Yeah.
Man, what was that like for you when you got the news?
Shit, I couldn't believe that shit. That shit fucked me up. From, talking to him every day. But not, I ain't gonna say every day, but you know what I'm saying? Just seeing how shit going, see how bro them living from off the pictures and shit like that.
The pain in Munna Duke's voice is unmistakable, raw, unfiltered, and heavy with grief. Learning of Von's death while confined behind prison walls only deepened the heartbreak. Stripped of the comfort of his community and unable to stand beside his people during Von's homegoing, Duke was left to mourn in silence. That kind of loss, experienced in isolation, leaves wounds that don't fade. The emotional weight wasn't his alone. Von's passing sent shockwaves through the prison where Duke was serving time. The atmosphere shifted. Even those who didn't know Von personally, fellow inmates and correctional officers, alike could feel the gravity of what had been lost.
It was really kind of like unreal to me, because I'm like, damn, you know what I'm saying? Like seeing bro them seeing him in the magazine, seeing him, on the tablet and shit like that. So I'm like, then talking to him like, man, when you get out, man, woo, you know what I'm saying? So a lot of this shit was like damn, you know what I'm saying? Like, we in it, you know what I'm saying? But that shit, you know what I'm saying? That shit happened, whatever the case is, so. You know?
What was the reaction from the jail when they found out that he passed away?
Man, the jail that I was in, they was up, you know what I'm saying? From the correctional officers and all type of shit, you know what I'm saying? Because they for him too, you know what I'm saying? And they for me off the strength for him, you know what I'm saying? So they kind of jail up, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That even the correctional officers were visibly affected by Von's death speaks volumes about the power of his presence. In a place where lines between inmates and guards are sharply drawn, Von's charisma and music managed to blur those boundaries. His influence reached beyond bars and badges, connecting people across divides. For Youngin, who was still on the outside when the tragedy struck, the loss hit on multiple levels. It wasn't just the death of a close friend, it was the loss of a mentor. Someone who had shown him that making it from the block to the studio was possible. Von's rise had carved out a path for other O-Block artists to follow, and with his sudden absence, that roadmap felt incomplete. More than just an artist, Von had become a guiding force. His death left a void not only in the booth, but in the leadership and spirit of O-Block itself. Von wasn't just a rapper. He was a respected voice whose influence ran deep through the neighborhood. His death didn't just leave a void, it reshaped the dynamics of loyalty, leadership, and responsibility within his circle. In the aftermath, it was Munna Duke who gradually rose to take on a more visible role when he returned home. In the interviews that followed his release, Duke never missed a chance to speak on Von's authenticity. He consistently honored him as someone who never forgot where he came from, someone who remained grounded even as his fame and fortune soared. During a January 2024 interview, Duke summed it up in his usual straightforward style. Von was solid, through and through.
Now, when it comes to King Von, what was he really like?
As far as what?
As a person.
As a person?
Yes.
He was a genuine person, you know, like real stand-up guy, you know, loyal. Go look out for, you know what I'm saying? Like, make sure everybody around him good, you know what I'm saying? If he had a chance to, you know what I'm saying, a better person situation, he was a real good dude.
Duke's description of Von echoed what many who knew him had long said. Loyalty was his compass. No matter how high his success soared or how fast the money piled up, Von remained deeply rooted in the O. He never distanced himself from the people who had stood by him from the beginning. Instead, he worked to lift them up with him. But mourning Von's death wasn't just about losing a friend or a leader. It came wrapped in the harsh reality of Chicago's unrelenting cycle of violence, a cycle that had already taken far too many young lives. For Duke Youngin and countless others from the block, Von's murder wasn't just a heartbreaking personal tragedy. It was another brutal reminder that even making it in music didn't guarantee escape from the streets. They were trying to rise above. Success in music couldn't shield Von or those around him from the harsh fallout of street life. That truth made the mourning process even heavier, stirring up a complex blend of sorrow, frustration, and resolve. When Munna Duke finally returned home, he found himself stepping into a role he hadn't sought but was almost destined for, carrying Von's legacy and representing a block on a broader stage. With strong industry ties and a deep bond with Von, Duke became a natural bridge between the streets and the spotlight. It wasn't just about the music hit, it was about honoring a brother. In the years following Von's death, both Duke and Youngin made it a point to keep his name alive, weaving his presence into their lyrics, interviews, and every move they made. For them, Von wasn't gone, he was a mission they carried forward. Keeping Von's name alive wasn't just something Duke and Youngin talked about, it was something they lived. You could see it in their choices, in the paths they carved, and in the music they released. Duke, in particular, channeled Von's spirit through his sound, blending his own lived experiences with a storytelling style that paid clear homage to his fallen brother. Tracks like Murder, which featured posthumous verses from Von, stood as both tribute and continuation proof that Von's voice still echoed in the streets, long after his passing. For Youngin, honoring Von meant staying true to the unfiltered realism that had made Von's music so powerful. His lyrics didn't sugarcoat the struggle, they embraced it, just like Von did, keeping the legacy rooted in truth and grit. Through their music and beyond, Duke and Youngin carried on a deeper mission, documenting the gritty truths of O. Block life while preserving the legacy of someone who meant more than just chart numbers. Their songs became both a mirror and a megaphone, reflecting the struggle while honoring the fallen. But it wasn't just about the music. Duke, in particular, made it a point to speak openly about Von during interviews, offering stories that peeled back the layers of the King Von image and revealed the real person behind the fame. These reflections weren't about boosting streams or riding a wave, they were about preserving Von's humanity, ensuring that he wouldn't be remembered only through headlines or controversy, but as the loyal, complex, and driven man he truly was. I've got a ton of memories with Von, Duke once shared, his voice thick with reflection, but the one that sticks with me the most is when he first came home. He looked at me and asked, "You think I should start rapping?" And me, being real with him, I was like, hell no. We had never rapped a day in our lives, so it sounded wild at the time. I just couldn't picture it, you know? He paused, shaking his head with a smile. But he proved me all the way wrong. He really did that, and it changed my life too. That pivotal moment would mark the beginning of a legacy neither of them could have predicted. Yet, after Von's death, that legacy became entangled in the intensifying storm of Chicago's drill scene. His passing, killed in a dispute involving another rapper's crew, was tragically symbolic of the very street conflicts that had shaped and haunted the drill movement from the beginning. The lines between music and real life had long blurred in Chicago's drill scene, But Von's death drove that truth home in the most tragic way. His end mirroring the very street conflicts that so many drill lyrics chronicled. In a 2023 interview, Duke opened up not only about the personal pain of losing Von, but also about the deep impact it had on their entire block. "It hit us hard," he admitted. "Von was like a big bro to all of us, one of the older ones, who really held weight in the neighborhood. Losing him, it hurt, I won't lie. Yet even in the midst of that grief, there was a quiet but powerful resolve to make sure Von's death wasn't in vain. His influence wasn't just in the bars he spit, it lived on in the doors he'd opened, the paths he paved, and the belief he sparked in those who came after him. Von didn't just make music. He laid down a blueprint for survival and success, built on raw talent, tireless work ethic, and a refusal to fake who he was. That legacy became a compass for Duke and Youngin, shaping the way they moved through life, from their verses to their relationships, from their hustle to how they maneuvered within the ever-dangerous drill scene. Keeping Von's name alive wasn't just about homage, it became their mission. But in a cruel twist of fate, both Duke and Youngin would meet ends eerily reminiscent of Von's gundown at pivotal moments. Just as their stars were rising, their stories, like Von's, were born in the concrete of Chicago's South Side in the heart of Parkway Gardens, known to the world as O Block. What began as brotherhood in the trenches grew into a movement, and ended as a tragedy etched into the legacy of drill. Out of the unforgiving concrete of O Block, a brotherhood was born, one that would etch its name into the history of drill rap. From this infamous stretch of Chicago's South Side, three names rose to carry the hopes, pain, and stories of their neighborhood: King Von, Munna, Duke, and Youngin. Together, they became the heartbeat of O Block's drill movement. Voices forged in chaos, yet driven by talent too raw to ignore, long before the chains, the foreign whips, or the tragedies that would claim each of their lives too soon. They were just kid shorties trying to survive in one of the deadliest blocks in America. O Block, named in memory of fallen Black Disciples member O.D. Perry, had already cemented its place in the city's violent history, with 19 shootings recorded between June 2011 and June 2014 alone. It was in this pressure cooker of loss, loyalty, and survival that Von, Duke, and Youngin built bonds that ran deeper than blood, bonds that would carry them to greatness, and ultimately, follow them to their graves. They weren't just associates, they were real ones. Day ones. Brothers in every way that counted. Before the world knew him as King Von, he was just Devin Beneda, sharp-minded kid from the South Side who naturally rose to lead those around him. Born in 1994, Von grew up attending Dulles Elementary, where he crossed paths with many of the future central figures in the O Block story, including Rashawn Munna, Duke Vance. Though Von was a bit younger than Duke, their bond was instant and undeniable. When asked in an interview if he remembered exactly when they first met, Duke smiled and said, "What you mean? Like how old we was? Where we was at? We was young as hell." The truth was, they'd known each other so long. It felt like they were always there side by side, growing up in the trenches, learning the codes of the block, and laying the foundation for a loyalty that would last far beyond the music. "I know we was young, like elementary school." "Yep, something like that," Duke said, smiling faintly as he dug into memories from a simpler time. When asked what kind of kid Von was, he paused, then shrugged. "Regular, you know, just hoopin', doing little kid stuff." Back then, they were just two kids running around the South Side, shooting hoops, getting into mischief, and trying to enjoy childhood in one of the city's toughest neighborhoods. But what seemed like harmless fun at the time was actually the start of something far deeper. Those days of bawling after school and growing up side by side on the harsh streets of O Block forged a bond that would survive prison walls, industry, pressures, and the unforgiving weight of street life. As Von and Duke tightened their brotherhood at Dulles Elementary, they had no idea they were laying the bricks of a cultural wave that would eventually bring their block global attention. Their loyalty wasn't manufactured, it was built in real time, under real pressure, through real pain. And while those two formed the early core, the circle would grow. Daryl Youngin Givens, the youngest of the trio, came up in the Jets and followed closely in Von's footsteps. By the time tragedy struck in 2025, when Youngin, just 26, was gunned down in a shooting, he had already made his mark as the next generation of O Block talent. Cut from the same cloth, drawn to the same struggle, and powered by the same hunger, Youngin carried the torch lit by Van only to have his own light extinguished too soon. Von's music hit because it was real, raw emotion, full truth, His loyalty to O Block and refusal to fake anything earned him deep respect in a place where staying real meant survival. Between 2011 and 2012, everything changed. Chief Keef, from the same blocks, blew up with hits like I Don't Like and Love Sosa, putting drill on the global map. His rise proved there was a way out, a path from hallway hustles to nationwide tours. Von, Duke, and later Youngin all followed that blueprint in their own ways. But while Keef was breaking records, Von was fighting a serious case that could have ended it all. Duke, too, was locked in a cycle of bids, stuck behind bars. Watching their hood evolve from afar, O Block was turning into a landmark in hip-hop. But Duke wasn't always there to see it. Altogether? Probably 5-6 years, he said when asked about his time locked up. The system was a revolving door for many from the block, including Von and Duke. Around 2017, during one of Von's stretches of freedom, he connected with Lil Durk, fellow Chicago artist who saw something real in Von's storytelling and presence. Durk brought him in, giving Von a shot to become a key voice in drill. Von and Duke's bond ran deeper than just music. It wasn't some clout-based crew, it was real brotherhood. Von always made sure Duke ate with him. Bro made me rap, Duke admitted. Once I got out, they really made me do that. Seeing Von go from the block to the booth lit a fire in Duke. Until then, rap hadn't felt like a real option, just survival or sports. Von's rise showed him another way, proving one man's come-up could unlock someone else's path too. When Von dropped Welcome to O Block in 2020, hitting number 5 on the Billboard 200, he kept his day ones close. He featured Duke on tracks like Gang_and Murder, shining a light on his brother from the block and giving him space to speak his truth. These weren't just features, they were proof of loyalty forged in the trenches. Meanwhile, Youngin was carving out his own space in drill. His raw lyrics and honest portrayal of O Block life earned him real respect. He didn't hit mainstream charts like Von, but in the streets, his name carried weight. The system still found ways to interfere. Court restrictions kept Von and Durk from Lincoln during tours due to pending charges. But through it all, they backed each other up. When Duke dropped Welcome to the Jungle in 2023, it wasn't just a win for him, it was a statement from the block. The title honored the wild environment that raised him, and the music didn't fake a thing. But while the music rose, so did the pressure. The same streets that gave them their voice were watching and waiting. In the end, those blocks that built them also took them, turning rise-up stories into reminders of how real it gets. The streets pulled hard, and the brotherhood of Von, Duke, and Youngin faced its final test through tragedy, separation, and death. But even after they were gone, their bond lived on. Then came May 9, 2025, a grim echo of Von's fate. In the early hours, Rach and Munna Duke Vance, 31, and Daryl Youngin from Dujet's Given, 28, were gunned down outside Pork Chop, a spot on North Broadway in Chicago's Edgewater. Unlike Von, who died in Atlanta, Duke and Youngin were taken in their own city, just not on their home turf. Around 1:20 a.m., at least 2 shooters opened fire as the pair exited the restaurant, catching them with precision that screamed setup. A third man, also 31, was hit but survived. Duke died from a chest wound at Weiss Hospital. Youngin passed at St. Francis after taking multiple shots. The attack looked surgical. Whoever pulled it off knew where they'd be and when, raising hard questions about who tipped the killers and why it happened so far from O Block. News spread fast. Chicago was shook. Chicago's drill scene reeled. Posts flooded X with RIPs for Duke and Youngin, drawing painful parallels to King Von's death. The pattern was too familiar. Another pair of O Block rappers gunned down just as their stars rose. It reinforced the idea that in drill, success doesn't guarantee safety. Among the most devastated was Fat Banks, aka Miss Buck's Munna Duke's baby mother and the former partner of Lil Durk's late brother D-Thung. Her Instagram tribute to Duke cut deep, mourning not just a partner, but a young father stolen from his child. Asian Doll, Von's former girl and a vocal keeper of his legacy, also spoke out, mourning another pair of lives lost and calling out the cycle swallowing young black artists whole. The deaths of Von, Duke, and Youngin followed the same from O Block, staying true to their roots, getting love in the industry, then getting hit with bullets just as the doors opened wider. Their murders raised harsh questions. Was staying real with your block a death sentence in this game? No one had been arrested. The streets and socials did what they always do, filled the void with theories. Rumors flew about who spun the block. Front Street, 757 bloodbath. Tycoon World, and Ghoulie Gang were all named in different posts. Some claimed Front Street flexed block chains, online and old-school move to claim a body, but nothing official backed it. The streets talked, but sorting truth from flex became damn near impossible in an era where every post could be real or just for clout. Still, one fact stood. Munna Duke and Youngin were gone. All that remained were memories, music, and the question who's next. Duke and Youngin's deaths were almost certainly the result of long-running gang wars tied to Oblek's identity. The conflict between Oblek's black disciples and rival sets like the Gangster Disciples of Tuckville and Giro City had claimed lives for years, and this hit was just the latest in that bloody history. Though the shooting took place far from their usual turf, it carried all the signs of a targeted strike. After King Von's death, Duke had stepped into a leadership role, and federal documents from a 2024 RICO trial identified him as Individual B, a key figure in the BD structure. That label boosted his street rep but also made him a top target. Youngin, though not named in official paperwork, had gained respect for staying real and continuing Von's legacy, making him a target by association. Taking out both in one move would be seen as a major win for any rival set. Ironically, Duke had hinted at wanting to step away from the streets after Von's murder, especially once he became a father. But the pull of Oblek's culture, the loyalty to his block, and the pressure to keep it real made walking away nearly impossible. As he once said, "I don't sell drugs. That underscore too slow. I don't like that. I don't like people." Still, even if he wanted out, the life never really let him go. Duke's reality was harsh. He couldn't just be chatting with dozens or hundreds of junkies every day. That life wasn't for him. He was used to smaller, intense circles, locked up in jail, caught in shootouts, living with constant threats from all sides. He wasn't interested in hanging out with people who could betray him or set him up. There was no desire to pull a gun over drug deals. He needed a different path. This raw look at Duke's options paints a clear picture for someone with his background. The choices were painfully limited, but music presented a real opportunity. A way up that didn't involve the relentless grind of dealing drugs or the dangerous risks of heists. For many in Duke's shoes, those paths seemed like the only routes to survival and success. Still, the music route wasn't without its perils. When the lyrics spoke openly about real conflicts and ongoing street rivalries, it brought its own kind of danger. For Young, still climbing and carving his name, the lure of music's promise was powerful. His honest lyrics and growing fan base hinted at a breakthrough not unlike what Von had already reached. Tragically, that potential was cut short before it could fully blossom, adding a heartbreaking layer to Duke's untimely death. It wasn't just a personal loss, it was the extinguishing of a rare talent who might have pushed drill music to new heights. For fans and friends of Munna Duke and Youngin, their deaths stand as more than individual tragedies. They are painful reminders of a brutal cycle that continues to steal gifted young lives. Each loss sends shockwaves far beyond those immediately affected, touching families, friends, and communities already weighed down by years of trauma and pain. Violence, the mother of Duke's child, shared a sorrowful tribute that went beyond her own pain. She mourned not only a lost partner but also the stolen chance for a young father to watch his child grow. It's a deeply human loss, one that cold statistics and news headlines often overlooked up, but the stories of Munna Duke and Youngin don't end with tragedy. Their music lives on, giving a voice to realities that mainstream media frequently ignores. For many listeners, their songs mirror personal struggles and dreams, offering a rare authenticity that resonates deeply. Ironically, the very truthfulness that made them vulnerable to danger also made them gifted storytellers. Through their lyrics, they painted the complex, raw portrait of life in neighborhoods like Chicago's South Side, layers of experience and emotion that outsiders could never fully grasp. Their bond was forged in the harsh streets, a brotherhood strengthened by shared trials and the fierce environment they navigated together. Their story of hardship and triumph stands as a powerful reminder of how deep connection and loyalty can thrive, even in the fiercest and most unforgiving environments. Munna Duke and Youngin looked out for one another, lifting each other up and celebrating every victory, proof that positive bonds can grow even in the darkest places. With formal justice often out of reach, the drill community finds ways to cope with these painful losses. Through music, social media, and the intricate mourning rituals born from repeated trauma, they process grief together. New songs will emerge, RIP posts will flood timelines, and the memories of Von, Duke, and Youngin will live unetched into the collective heart of their community. Their names now join the sorrowful roster of gifted artists, taken too soon by Chicago's relentless cycle of violence from O.D. Perry and L.A. Capone to FBG, Duck, and countless others whose legacies continue to inspire and haunt the city. Though their deaths have become woven into the city's sorrowful story, Von, Duke, and Youngin will also be celebrated for their vital contributions to drill music. Their honest portrayals of A Block and the brotherhood that bonded them in life now unite them even in death. The violent cycle that took Von, Duke, and Youngin continues to impact countless young people in Chicago and beyond. Breaking free from this cycle demands more than individual talent or willpower. It calls for systemic change. Real progress means tackling deep-rooted issues like poverty, education, housing, and access to opportunity in communities that have long been ignored and underserved. Until those changes happen, the heartbreaking pattern symbolized by these three brothers in both music and life is sadly likely to repeat, stealing away more talent, potential, and lives that deserved a chance to thrive. Thanks for watching. If you want to dive into more stories like this, just click one of the boxes on your screen.